Okay, guys, welcome back to Let's Get Freaky podcast. I am very excited tonight to welcome to the show. We have got Teal Gray with us. How are you? Welcome to Let's Get Freaky.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to get into it tonight because I know there's a lot we're going to talk about paranormal investigating. You're
Yeah,
an author. There's a lot there.
yeah.
Can you, for anyone that doesn't know you, can you give us a brief description of
Sure.
who you are?
I'm which is funny to some people, but I'm an actually ordained minister who has gifts of psychic intuition, and so that's, always a little bit of a back and forth quandary. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it okay? I don't know. But the more that I learned, the more that I went in depth with the studies, the more yeah, it's just fine. It's just a gift, It's
Hmm.
just it has helped so many people, and so that's where I've learned to just make my peace with it. And so there's that. But I am a best-selling author, and I love writing. I just really do. I think I like the research as much as anything else, just to dig in. My books so far, I think I'm going to dip my toe into fiction here pretty soon. But so far, all my books are nonfiction. They're scheduled under nonfiction. So
Okay.
I've written a couple just recently for the History Press, and Haunted Denton and Haunted Weatherford. And I'm going to be working on a book called Haunted Jefferson, Texas. So
Oh, wow.
I'm always got something in the mix.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I live in a very haunted property. The front house has different hauntings than the back house, and so does the property. And you've interviewed a really good friend of mine, Mark Foltz, before. And
Yes.
Mark has stayed here and had a number of experiences every time he comes. He's like, well, what's going to happen now? But there's an
Wow.
elemental apparently in my back pasture by all the big pecan trees. And then there's, oh gosh, there must be 200 acres behind me that's just never been touched. And he's like, yeah, there's something out there.
Wow. He is such a cool guy.
Oh,
He's a
he's wonderful.
really
He can pick
lovely
up on
man.
so many things. It's
Yeah.
great.
So,
So there's that, and then I do go in. People have me go into different buildings, whether it's their house or a business, a hotel, you name it, historic property, just to see if I pick up on anything. And I always go in with no information. You don't want to know what's there.
mhm.
You always do better. I know some people are like, well, I'd like to at least know something. There's nothing wrong with that, but I like to go in, and Mark does too, with not knowing anything, because you don't want to get some really great information and then in the back of your mind go, they didn't mention that. So, or they said it was something else. So maybe, you don't, I just don't like anything to block the flow.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. And then, of course, sometimes I just do investigations, whether it's private or public, whatever. So, just
Awesome.
did a great big one. Just had a huge one here in Denton. They expected, yeah, they're like, gosh, we've never done it before. They're trying to lean into Halloween here, like some cities lean into Christmas, like do a whole month, just a big thing. So people all really get involved. Well, so I'm doing four different things for Denton, Texas. And one of them was leading a paranormal investigation of the International Order of Oddfellows Cemetery in Denton. And they were like, I don't know. It's 22 acres. And I was like, it's vast. So I have a big team, and they're a great team. So I knew it didn't matter. I mean, we've handled 200 people before. It's no problem. And they
Wow.
were like, oh, I don't think we'll get that many. I think we'll get maybe 20 or 30. And I was like, there's no way, it's going to be. But I was like, okay. But I was thinking to myself, no, I had the plan for a lot more, but it ended up being 350. So there was a lot,
Wow.
but it went so smooth. I'm telling you, we still could have parked more cars. Everybody was so great. They were really into it. Families even were there. It was just a great event, thankfully. And there wasn't even one car that honked. You know how you get that many people, you get hundreds of people, and
Hmm.
people get frustrated or something? Nobody was frustrated. There was not one argument. There wasn't any like, ugh, waiting in line kind of thing. I had stations throughout, 6 stations throughout the whole property. So it left room for people to roam and investigate. And then we had lots of equipment, and I brought water, soft drinks, snacks, and sandwiches, different things for all the people. Like people were just
Wow.
eating and just out having a little. We're just having a party out
I
there.
think that's got to
So,
be the
but they
biggest
got some good
paranormal.
evidence, and it was fun.
Yeah, that's got to be the biggest paranormal investigation I've ever heard of. That's a
Oh
lot of
yeah, and they
people.
get. I mean, mine are pretty big, but that's the biggest one I've had. That was a surprise. So, but it worked out great. We had the space, and like I said, it was just so nice, and everybody had a good time. And we had people out there who had their kids with them, all the
Hmm.
way up to people who were using their walkers and their little scooters and stuff that had come even from the senior center. Like it was all ages out there. And
Wow.
it was just everybody having so much fun. And I did have a lot of equipment, a lot of flashlights, different things for them so they could investigate. Then we did a great big investigation that I led at the last hour of it. And so they could really see how things work and, ask some questions. But I think they really enjoyed being involved, not just I mean, not that people don't enjoy a lecture. I did one last night and it went really well. Everybody had fun, but I involved them as well. I don't sort of just talk at you. I want you to talk
Hmm.
back, kind of like we are. Just
Yeah,
have a little conversation, have some fun. And gosh, you meet so many great people. I think that's
hmm,
one of the best things about it. But
yeah.
yeah, Sunday was great. It was
That's
terrific.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
I did have one little accident, I got to tell you. I had injured my Achilles heel, and just after I got back from the UK, and so I was going to go to the orthopedic, place just for that. But at the event, I stepped up going uphill, and some rocks kind of gave, and oh, there's probably 20 or 30 people with me. Anyway, we all heard this pop. That was
Oh,
my Achilles tendon.
oh
And so,
no.
yeah, so I've been at the doctor today. I've got to do some more tests tomorrow. So it's an
Oh,
ongoing thing, but I stayed.
see,
I didn't leave,
see.
and so I did
Wow.
interviews and did the whole thing with that happening. So
Fair
inside, I was
play.
like, I know I need to go to the hospital, but outside, I was like, let's go,
Yeah, the
everybody.
show
Let's
must
ask
go
another
on.
question.
Wow.
The show did have to go on, and so I couldn't leave, and I'm
Yeah.
glad I didn't.
What part of the UK was you in? What part of the UK was you
Oh
in?
gosh, I went this time. We started out in London, and
Okay.
then I tell you where I keep missing. For years and years, I keep visiting UK. I want to go to Chatsworth House,
Where's that? I
and
should
that
know.
is up.
Where's
Oh gosh, when I stay in York, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a
okay.
half from there. Kind of like where the movies for Sherwood Forest and all that were made.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Chatsworth House has all this beautiful statuary and all these things in it. Pride and Prejudice, they filmed one of the modern ones there. And
Hmm.
so that's always on my bucket list. It just never happens.
Yeah.
And it
Come
didn't happen this
back.
time, but we did go close to it. Yeah, we kind of drive by it. We oh gosh. So this time we kind of focused on we went to Edinburgh. You can't go that
Oh,
close from me and not go to
beautiful
Edinburgh.
place.
I
Yeah.
love Stirling, love Stirling. England, just anywhere you want to go there is gorgeous, as you know. And then we went up through Ireland, spent some more time. We usually just go a couple of places, but we went all the way even to the Achill Islands, like the farthest from everything, and did the whole kind of loop and went
Wow.
everywhere. And I love castles.
Hmm.
And so, I always want to hit as many castles as you can. I think we got 10 this time, a lot. So
Wow. That's
we just went
cool.
all over and but I may have to take a little break. I was going to go back. I love to go to Hogmanay, have you ever done that one in
No,
Edinburgh?
no, I've not. What's that?
You- Oh my
I
gosh,
know.
how could you
I
not
have been to
see?
Edinburgh. Edinburgh's a beautiful place, but I've not. What's
Yeah.
that?
Oh
I
wow.
might have done
You
it.
get
I just might not be knowing
torches.
the name.
you wouldn't forget it. You get lit torches and you all march together, like thousands of people all make this little pilgrimage march up the hill, and they light these huge effigies, and it's just a great party, and
Oh
I love
wow.
it. And you do it, at New Year's. And so I guess it was last year, we did it, and you walk up everything, but it was happening calendar wise. It happened like the day before New Year's. So then we hopped the train, went back to London, and ended up getting there just in time for New Year's Eve there. So that was kind
Wow.
of fun. But yeah,
That's
but
cool.
I was going to do that again, but I think this Achilles problem is going to keep me home this year. So
Yeah, for a little bit.
next year, yeah,
Yeah,
just a
that's
little downtime. I'll write another book.
I've, I've got to say, you mentioned Mark earlier. He's an awesome guy,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to talk about me too much tonight. But I've got to say this because he was recently on the show, and this happened after we'd recorded.
Uh-huh.
So basically, I've had a bit of long story short. I've had quite a bit of activity going on in the house, and the kids have seen some things. My two youngest both saw what they thought was my eldest daughter walk past the door, and it wasn't
Uh-huh.
her. So they both saw someone
It's
that looked like,
unnerving. It's
yes,
unnerving at least.
and
Yeah,
they both definitely saw that and didn't. I know that they both didn't know that they'd both seen the same thing, but it was very
sure.
strange. Anyway, so we've had a bit of activity going on in that area, and after I'd finished talking to Mark, he said, "You've got a young lady in your hallway, which is
Oh,
where they saw
where
this
they saw her.
entity." Yeah, and he
Yeah.
said that, and my whole body just went goosebumps all over. I was like,
Yes.
wow. And
Oh
then he sort of
my goodness.
explained the how my hallway looked, and I was like, that's amazing, man. It really blew me away.
He really does. I mean, he bilocates like in a sec, just a flash, like boom, he's there. He
Yeah,
probably was with you and just felt something and was like, well, let me just have a peek.
yeah, it was amazing, and my whole body just
Yeah.
went goosebumps because I was like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
how does
That's
he know that?
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah. He can also help you get rid of it if you need to.
yeah. We said it. He said it was a nice lady, girl.
Yeah.
He said it was a good energy, like not a bad, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was just very strange because there were a lot of things going on in that area. So
It's a
yeah,
surprise.
I had
It's
to
good.
mention that. Where
Yeah.
where does it all start for you? Where did you
Well,
with the
I
paranormal?
mean, my earliest memories, seriously, I mean, I remember little flashes just being like even in a crib, but then more like when I was sort of 5 or 6, something like that. I used to see, and I still don't understand it, and nobody, I've always asked people, and they never could explain it really, but I used to see like images and things as if they were kind of just floating around. And I used to see disembodied hands, not necessarily praying hands, but just hands. And I never could figure that out. But that was really, to me, that was really scary. I wouldn't want that today. I've not seen that since I was a child. And I wouldn't want to. I didn't
What
like
was
it.
that? Just
Uh,
floating
like
hands.
floating hands. Sometimes they were sort of like praying hands or something, but mostly just like hands. Yeah, it was weird. And then I would see faces, different faces and things, and they'd just be kind of like floating or whatever. But then as I was, probably, in school, maybe 7, I didn't really think about it because others were all 8, 10, 12 years older than me, and so they were off having their lives by the time I was, anything. So I kind of grew up like an only child, and my parents were just so busy. I spent a lot of just alone time, and I didn't really have anybody to let me know, kind of like your kids have each other to be like, did you see that? Did you see that? Yeah, I saw that.
Hmm.
And I didn't really know until I was realized that not everybody saw things, and then I learned to keep quiet about that quite quickly, because you don't want to be the odd man out on that one. But it's just something that, it was scary to me, really scary. And I still don't enjoy it. I got to tell you, people really want me to enjoy it. They're like, but this is what you write about. This is your thing. And I'm like, they say write what you know. So
Yeah.
that's what it is. But it doesn't mean that it ever gets like comfortable. Like with your girl going down the hall. I'm just, I mean, I have ghosts here. Do I get rid of them? No. I? Sure. But they don't, it's their space, it's their house, it's their whatever. They lived here. Some of them I don't think were ever in this house. I think it's just the land. There
Hmm.
used to be a big old farmhouse on my property, and it burned, oh gosh, it burned in the early 1900s, but it was a late 1800s house. And and there was an old well that's now not used, that's capped off in the back. Behind the property used to be it was a seasonal creek when we bought the property about 30 years ago. But back in the day, it was what they used to have trails of where people would travel them and move cattle and things. And the Goodnight Loving Trail was pretty well known here in Texas. And behind my property was part of the Goodnight Loving Trail. And so some of the hauntings, especially a little girl, I'll tell you about if you want to hear it,
Yeah.
I think might have to do with that time period. Um, did she die in the fire? I don't know. Did she fall in the well? I don't know. Was it something where they were traveling on the Goodnight Living Trail and she died and they had to bury her? I just don't know. And nobody's really, Mark's very intuitive, and I've had other people and myself. It's never really been anything you could pinpoint because either they don't remember or they don't want to talk about it or it's upsetting or whatever, but you get nothing. So you
Hmm.
kind of have to go on the way they're dressed. And she was dressed, she's just a little blonde-haired girl. Do you want me to go ahead and tell you the story?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so it's it's in several of the books because she does a lot of appearing, but it's a little girl, probably let's say maybe 8 years old, and she's got long blonde hair, and she's usually in this little what looks like a little prairie dress, just a real simple kind of shift dress from the 1800s kind of times, and so I first noticed her when I used to do historical costuming for the Dallas Historical Society. And so so there's two houses. There's the front house, and then farther back, there's what we call the back house. So then it sits on just under 3 acres. So I was in the back house, which I use kind of, or used to use, let me say used to use as an office. I don't think I've been out there in a year because that place just got to be so much. And even on shows like yours, when we would try to do something, you would hear the noises, there'd be things, the audio, the visual, everything would mess up from the things, our faces would be changing and stuff. It was just too much. And so I'm like, okay, guys, enough of that. There's different, quieter kind of haunting energy in the front house. So I'm in the front house with you, and we'll probably be fine because this is kind of where I
It's a
do these now.
safe space.
But I was back there by myself. I did have company. There were people in town, but everybody was in the front house. And I said, listen, we've got, to go to an event and I've got to drop these dresses off tomorrow. I want to finish. And there's one that they didn't think I could do in time. I wasn't sure, but I thought, I think if I stay up like in the wee hours, which is fine for me, I can kick it out, right? So I got it all cut out. I'm sewing it together. And some of those dresses, they have big, long trains. So we're talking like 6 feet of a skirt. I got a good portion into it, like almost done, and realized I sewed one side one way and then the other side, they weren't likewise. One was the back end of the fabric and one was the correct side. So at that same exact moment that I'm sewing, 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 and you know how when you are sewing, you're kind of bent over and you're paying attention, and right in my ear, right like as if somebody was up in my ear, right when I was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. You talk about the hair standing up. This little girl, or I mean, a little giggle, you can kind of distinguish between a girl or a boy. It was
Hmm.
a little girl's giggle, and she's like, and she's like, oh gosh, like she was watching, and she was like, that's so crazy. And you're not supposed to engage them. You're not supposed to run. You're not supposed to be too freaked out. So I just stopped, turned it off. And then while I'm just stopping, she kind of giggles. And then you can hear her laughter getting more faint as she's going from that room to through the dining room and kitchen to the back door, which is always her thing, always the back door. She's never come in the front door. It's always people see her or hear her at the back door. So, she and then you could hear the oddest thing, which made me go, gosh, that's odd, because I don't know when they had little shoes that would be the soles would make that clicking noise on the tile, but it was definitely had to be a hard sole to it, or at least the heel or something, because you could hear this little click as she was kind of skipping out and
Hmm.
giggling. And then I'm telling you, I stopped, turned that machine off. I'd left the lights on even. I just went, locked the door, like, nope, I don't think at nighttime is the time for me to be out here. Went in the front house and forgot about that.
Yeah.
But that
Wow.
was just one of many times. There were there was a little boy one time that was a neighbor boy, and they live, I mean, I think we've got the 3 acres, so there's some land between us, but not vast. And I would see him at the fence line, kind of by the pecan trees. And I noticed that, but I didn't care. He's on his side of the property. It was fine, but I just thought it was an odd place for him to just pick to sit right at the fence and play. But, kids will be kids. He was probably about 5. And one day I was out there just, working on the landscape and stuff. And this lady from next door kept yelling, "Hey, hey, hey." And I thought, gosh, what's going on? I just wanted one day, to be quiet out here. And so I went to the fence line, and she's like, "Hey, I've been wanting to set up a play date with your granddaughter." She goes, "No offense, but I mean, she's young, so I'm guessing it's your granddaughter." And I was like, "I don't have any because at the time I do now, but I didn't have any grandchildren. And I
Wow.
have a grandson. I don't have a granddaughter. And so I was like, I don't have any grandchildren. My daughters are grown, but they don't have children yet. And she was like, "Well, who's the little girl then? Is that like a relative?" And I was like, "What little girl?" And I really wasn't thinking. I was so into what I was doing, like I was disconnected from my own story, And so she's like, "Well, the little blonde girl." And she said, "I have to say, also, like sometimes it's a little chilly out, and she's in that little shift dress. I'm not trying to get into your business, but shouldn't she have a little jacket or something?" And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh." And the little boy goes, "Yeah, sometimes she says she's cold." And I was like, "Oh." I said, "Do you see her now or anything?" He goes, "She was here." And the mother goes, "Why are you being a little odd about it?" I said, I'm going to tell you something. I don't expect you to believe me, but it's fairly documented. So, a lot of people who don't know each other and have never been here have had experiences. So it's not something, like you said, like your kids.
Hmm.
They're not telling each other. It's just a isolated incidents to each person, right?
Yeah.
So I told her, I said, "What you're seeing," and sometimes she is very solid. This is true. That's a ghost. And she stopped, and the little boy kind of looked, and she goes, "Come here, come here, come here." And so he goes to his mother, and I said, "Listen, I'm not trying to scare you, and I would never talk about this in front of him except to say you really shouldn't play with her." And he goes, "Sometimes she scares me." And I said, "Sometimes she scares me too." And
Whoa.
and he goes, "I asked her, and my mom did, to come on over and have lunch or come over and play, and she always says I can't come over. I have to stay here." Now, why can she not cross that fence line? I don't know. um
Wow.
I really don't. I know that this property has been this size since, the 1800s. I know that. I don't know why. I mean, but other family members owned other properties beside it and stuff, and they just built that way. So I don't know if it's just because the property lines were always as they were.
Hmm.
I don't, but she obviously, I mean, she said to them, I can't leave. And we've only ever seen her over on our land, and other people have seen her on our land, but nobody, even
Wow.
before we bought the property, has ever seen this little girl on another piece of property. So that's kind of a mystery as to why can she not leave this part
Yeah.
of the land?
That's
And
wild.
it is wild. And so the mother, I mean, obviously she believed me, and the little boy, and I was like, he's like, "Oh, there she is." And I said, "Where is she?" And he goes, "She's laughing at us and going in the back door of the back house." And he goes, "That's where she always goes." And I turned around. I didn't see a thing, and the mother didn't see anything. And so she's like, "Where's this girl?" And I said, I mean, if we can't see her, he can see her. He goes, "I can see her, and you can't see her." I was like, "I can't see her, no." And and he goes, "Oh, she's inside." And I was like, "Well, that's where I'm not going." And so the mother immediately called her parents. They came over, got them. They had been sharing the house next door with somebody else, and they never came back. They had their stuff sent and never came back. And I was like, "I'm so
Wow.
sorry that all this happened. I mean, it's not that it's my fault or anything, but I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry it scared you, but I do think it's a good idea for the little boy not to be so involved with her."
Hmm.
Um, and he again, he was like, "She's scary sometimes." And I was
That's
like, and I
wild.
did say, I said, "I see you at the fence sometimes. Were you playing with her every time when?" Yeah, I'd go right up to the fence and I would sit with my knees up to the fence and put toys through to her, for her to play because she couldn't come on this side of the fence. And I was like, oh, okay, okay, okay. So I don't know. That's a mystery, and maybe somebody that's watching will be able to tell us why a spirit could not like go across the fence or
Yeah.
property line. I don't know.
Bound to a
But
certain area for some reason. That is very
yeah, like
strange.
this acreage and that's it. So I don't know if it's because maybe she died on this land, but I mean other people die and then they roam around. So
Do you think
I don't
she
know.
she is a little girl, or do you think it's possible that she's some other
Dark entity.
dark entity? I know I don't
It
want to
could be.
scare or say
No, it
anything.
could be. And let me tell you why that negative, kind of dark, scary side is a possibility. My eldest daughter at one point was living in the back house, and she used to, like, it came up that she was like, "Gosh, I had this terrible dream, and I saw this little girl." This was before the little boy story. Yeah. So, and she's like, "This little girl in blonde hair kept getting closer each night to the foot of the bed." But she's like that last night, and she was like, you know, I'm not chicken, but at the same time, like, what's up? Because she said she had a really menacing smile when she got close to the foot of the bed, and she had her hand behind her back. Like, well, what was behind her back? I mean, like something scary. And so I don't know. That's a mystery. But other
Man,
people have seen her. Um,
have you
and
have you seen her?
I've only heard her and felt her breath, so to speak, like her right there in my ear that night. She giggled and went off. I haven't seen her, but only in like my mind's eye, like you kind
Hmm.
of imagine her here or there. And I had a little puppy that used to love to play in the back with me. And she did seem to, her energy, you could tell you it was her. Loved that puppy. But if the puppy was not in the back house or that back part of the land, then the puppy never acted like it saw anything because it would interact like if one of your children was like, oh, playing with the puppy, and it would jump up as if it was jumping up on somebody, like it was playing with somebody.
Whoa. Yeah.
And but anywhere else it never happened. So again, some reason she or it, whatever the entity was, could go in the back house and the back acreage, but that was it. never in the middle yard and never the front yard and never the front house.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you say
Yeah.
that there was a fire there? Did you say that at the
The
start?
original farmhouse burnt to the ground, and I never saw it. This was it was an 1800s house, and early 1900s it burned. The neighbor that used to live on that side where the little boy saw her, she had been there. Oh my gosh, she had been there like 40 years, so she knew a lot about this property, and she had lived in town for longer than that. But she was an older lady, but she remembered all about the house, about hearing about it, all about the well, all these different things that she had heard and through the years, and from some of the other neighbors that were pretty old, and just things that they could remember about.
Hmm.
And so she was the one that told me, about the house and the fire, and that this property that I'm on was the first one built in this area. And before they did road construction, which enlarged the road, when we first moved in here, it was two lanes going one way, one going the other. And since they've taken probably an acre of frontage, and now it is 6 lanes with a turn lane. So 7 lanes, a bike lane on each side, and sidewalks. So they've taken a lot of my land out front, but I
Wow.
still have a really long driveway and a big buffer, just the way it was built. But at one time, it was really, set back. So it's still
Wow.
nice. It's still a great property, but there was this little, I don't know, maybe not even a foot tall, but there was, a stone out there, and it had like some kind of inscription. And then over that, they had later put like a metal inscription about the land and the marker. And all of it had to do with the fact that it was like the first house, and it was, I guess, where they kind of take their measurements from, as they build other things in the street or whatever. But I told them specifically, I said, hey, when you dig that up, please put it here. Be careful, because that's a historic piece of this, and we'd like to do some research on it. We just don't know it. And they some the message didn't get passed down, and they just I don't even know what happened to it. They just bulldozed over everything, and so
Oh
I guess it was
man.
just lost. Yeah, but I mean, there still would be records and everything, so it could be
Hmm.
checked out. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an old property.
It would be interesting if you could look back somehow and see if there was a young girl that had passed
That died
there
in the
or
fire, maybe. And
yeah.
here's the problem with that, unless it would be just sheer luck. Our We have a beautiful square, one of the most beautiful. In fact, on my book Haunted Denton, the courthouse is on the cover, and that's an actual picture. But then the publisher used the picture and made it look more like a drawing or a painting, But it's a beautiful square, town square we have. However, it's had multiple fires through its time, and we're on our fourth courthouse. Like it's burnt
Oh
down
wow.
twice,
And they've
and back
rebuilt it.
way back, and so before digital stuff, and so all the lots and lots and lots of records were just lost. So but they still do have a lot, so maybe, it's certainly
Yeah.
possible.
Is the area that you're in, is there a lot of high strangeness there? Do other people
Yes.
experience it's not just your
Yeah,
house?
I think mine takes the cake
Yeah.
for some reason. But especially downtown where it's very historic. It
Hmm.
seems like, the old buildings. I used to have my office in the old theater. Used to be a old theater downtown, and now it has a giant bookstore, which is very haunted. People have books thrown at them while they're shopping. I mean, this has been going on for since it opened, decades and decades. And it's just they're not even surprised anymore. So you would think that'd be like, what? But they're like, oh, yeah, yeah.
It's just the
Well,
ghosts.
at least it didn't hit me. In fact, there's a lady, her name's Francesca Romano, and she was at the lecture last night for Haunted Denton, my book that I did. And she was telling her story, and I had a slide for her, but I said, Francesca, you tell your story because this is a good one. She was down in the basement. It's multiple stories. It's a big bookstore. She was down in the basement and just was looking around. She was pretty new from New York, and she just was kind of investigating Texas and all the old historic buildings. thought I'll just look around and find a good book. So she was digging around down there and went to the farthest part of the basement there in the bookstore. And a father was on a couch reading a children's book to his daughter. And she's like, oh, that's nice. And so she's just looking around, very calm, nothing in her mind about paranormal. I mean, she wasn't in a paranormal section, nothing. And really quickly, like just a couple of minutes in, she was just looking at the shelf. Her hands were down to her side, and a book forcefully came flying past her, almost hit her in the ear, almost hit her as it flew past, and it went enough, it blew her hair. So, and it slammed down on the floor in between where the father and daughter sat on the couch and where she was. And they were all startled, of course. And he was like, what? Did you see that? And she's like, I did see that because it almost hit me. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he gathered his daughter up and he's like, we're going to go. I think we better go. He's like, we're going to go upstairs. You want to come with us? She goes, I do, but let me pick this book up. And so she bends down to pick it up and she stops and he goes, what's the matter? She goes, look at the title. It said, I'm watching you. That was the
Oh,
title of the book, I'm watching you. Isn't that crazy?
whoa, that is
Yeah.
crazy.
And I
Oh
was so
my.
glad she was there because that's such a crazy title. And she
Yeah,
went
that's a message.
upstairs. Yeah. And she put it back on the shelf and then she went upstairs with the father and daughter and they talked to the manager and they said, "Oh, you met the guy. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, he throws books a lot, And she's like,
Oh,
"What?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's haunted, for sure." But I thought she had a great story, because she
yeah,
also had
man.
witnesses and then the title of that book just was like the best. You
Yeah.
couldn't I was like, I couldn't write that. That was so
And
good.
did you say
Yeah.
that was a theatre before it was the bookstore?
It was. It was a beautiful theater, and so it now it's got the bookstore in one part. They've made it into beautiful studio apartments, and then on one end they have offices. And so my office is on the second floor, but at the time I really needed a space. I just wanted a space to write, and I thought it'd be neat downtown. I was having so many meetings with people. I thought it'd be nice to just be downtown and not always having to dash downtown.
Hmm.
So they said, gosh, we just don't have anything. And I looked around the square and it just nothing was appealing to me. And I'll tell you why it wasn't in a minute, for one thing. But this one I was like, gosh, this is perfect. It's just such a neat old building. It used to be the theater, the opera house, theater. And so they were like, well, we do have one space, but we haven't had it. It's been like 17 years. It's been just shut up as a storage. And I said, oh, and you need the space? And they're like, no. And I said, okay, so you could clear it out. Yeah, we can have somebody clear it out if you really want it. And I was like, well, can I look at it? Yeah, I mean, I said, I gotta see it. Like, I gotta have something. I mean, you're charging quite a bit for it, so I'd like to look at it before I give you an answer and you hire somebody. And so I went, and it was beautiful. It had a beautiful door, and you walked in, and it was really unique to the rest of the offices. All the rest of the offices in that building are just squares. They're just like a square office. And this one had a little nook, and then it had like a back door that led to backstage. And I was like, what is this? And they were like, well, that was the backstage. This used to be the dressing room for the theater. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know why I was thinking the theater part would be downstairs. And they're like, no, you went upstairs to see the performance. Downstairs was everything else, and then upstairs, that's where the seating was. And so this was backstage, and they would go back here and go perform. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I said, yeah, I'll take it. It's beautiful space. And they were like, uh-huh. And they were weird about it, and I was just like, well, maybe it's just personalities. So I did ask, they got it all cleaned out, and they said, do you want to come take a look again now that it's empty and just see? And I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And I went to the back, and they're like, oh, you can just leave that locked. And I was like, do I have to? Like, is it off limits, or you're going to use it for storage? And they're like, we're not putting that thing in there. And I was like, okay. And I said, so I'm allowed to use it, the space. It's a big space. And they're like, if you want to. Just so weird, it's just like, no, just an odd conversation. And so I said, what's with the chair that's facing the wall and all the scratches on the wall? And they're like, don't touch that. We don't touch that. Nobody touches that. Just leave that alone. Just do what you want back here. But I would not touch that chair, and I wouldn't mess with the walls. I don't think I'd do anything back here. I mean, unless you just really have to. And I was like, okay, does something happen? It's weird looking. It looks like kind of an asylum thing or something. And they're like, I don't know, which you knew they did know something, you know? And
Yeah,
they're like, I don't
yeah.
know. And so I thought I couldn't get an answer out of anybody about it. So I moved in and, fluffed it up, made a nest there. And immediately, though, you could tell you weren't alone. You could feel it. They'd move things. Um, you'd have smells. But it smelled like fire enough to me that I called them out several times, and I was like, I don't know if something got bumped or damaged or something when you were moving things out of the storage in the back, but it smells like if I'd opened the back door, which led to backstage, the smell's stronger, but you can smell it in my office. It smells like something burning. So I don't know. Can you send somebody? Maybe it's wires. I just don't know, but I'm concerned about it. Not just for me, but this whole building, right?
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah, we'll come, but we can tell you it's fine. And I was like, I mean, I know I'm not hysterical. I'm not a hysterical kind of woman. I was raised by a Marine sergeant and three older brothers. I'm really not. So I really think you should look. They came out, they sent somebody out, and they're like, no, ma'am, everything's fine. If you smell fire, just it's fine. I said, well, but it's never been that way. I mean, I was always taught you smell fire, something's a wire shorted out, like something needs to be checked. Maybe it's not my office, maybe it's somebody else's office, but I should alert you. And they're like, no, we can't come out here all the time. And I was like, so you don't want me to let you know there's something. We just know what it is, man. And I was like, well, tell me.
Wow.
And this one guy left. He's like, no, ma'am, we can't discuss things. And so the other guy's like, I'll go ahead and button things up, and then I'll follow. I'll catch up with you. And so the older guy leaves, and the young guy waits for him to leave, and he's like, okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to shoot you straight. And I was like, please do, because all you guys give me the weirdest little answers, and I know there's something behind that. He said, okay, this used to be backstage. This was the dressing room. And so they got dressed in here and did the makeup. So there's a lot of energy in here. And he said, my girlfriend's really into this stuff. And he goes, I don't like it. I'm not into it, but I'm just going to tell you. There was more than one fire here, but there were people that died here in the fire, and some of them were children. And he said, this is backstage. So he said, this was part of the area. He said, you can't tell now. But he's like, not for your area, but on the other side of the wall and stuff where it's all been redone, it had burned. And then we rebuilt a lot of the stuff. And he said, part of it rebuilt, but he said, yeah, and he goes, the chair, I really don't know. I just know that chair has always been in here. And I said, it's such a beautiful old antique chair. I said, as you can see, my office is filled with antiques. He's like, yeah, you don't want to sit there. Don't touch it. I said, yeah, yeah, y'all told me that. And I was like, but why? I don't know. That's just what I hear. And with all the stuff that goes on, I mean, why would you want to test that? And I was like, okay. I said, what about the scratches? I just don't, I'm just not going to talk about any of it. And I was like, okay. He goes, but you know, are you work here a lot at night, and during the day, I mean, or odd hours? And I said, yeah. And he goes, why? And I said, well, I'm a writer, and I just, there's just different times I'll come up, it's quiet, I just write, or I'll start writing and then it gets later. I said, it's like a time cutoff? Is it, do I need to leave at a certain time? I don't have a problem with that. Just let me know. Y'all just didn't say. And I said, I have a parking space in the downstairs in the garage, so I'm I don't know. And he's like, no, there's no problem with time if you're happy to be in this giant place all by yourself. And he goes,
Man.
but you're not by yourself. And I said, yeah, it feels like there's something else here. He goes, yeah, ghost lady, ghosts. And he's like, I don't know. I gotta go. And he just took off. And I was like, well, at least I had more explanation than anything else. But I've had some of my friends that are law enforcement for many years, no nonsense kind of people. all walks of life, come and visit, and at times there'd be groups of them that would show up, and you know, five, six of us around there just visiting and having dinner. We bring it up to the office and talk, and some of them were writers, so you just kick around ideas and stories. But and they would be touched. Their hair would get moved. They would feel like a breath on them. They'd feel like something was following them. They heard voices. Sometimes they heard their names called out. And the lights, mine, you just never knew. Down the hall, and it was scary. I'm telling you, this was kind of like from a bad B movie scary. It was the longest hall because I was at the farthest end by the back staircase. There was a front staircase. Mine was by the back staircase. And so there was no light switch on my end of the long hall, which I thought was odd, So either I had to come all the way around the front in the dark, or, to get the light switch on and go up those stairs and down, or whatever, and or use a flashlight or something. But I didn't like that. I mentioned it to him. I was like, "How odd is it that this is no lights here?" And they're like, "Well, there's a light switch for the back staircase." And I was like, "Correct. I wouldn't want to go down I mean, it's pitch dark. There's no windows back here." So, and they're like, "You picked it." And I was like, "Well, it's the only one that was open. You cleared out a closet for me, so to speak."
Yeah.
And but it was so long. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many feet, but I would say like one, two, three, four, five, at least 10 office spaces down was the light switch. And all of us were there, and this one girl, she had a feisty little temperament. She used to do the ghost walks, and so she thought it was all kind of funny and humorous, and she respected them, but at the same time she didn't let them get to her. And she said, "Oh, we're playing with the lights out here, are we?" And I said, "Oh, hush, because this is bad enough sometimes. um the whole thing goes out, and I have to go down the back stairs, which feel really weird. And but that's and then you have to go the odd way out all the way down the front." And she's like, "Well, if you're gonna turn the lights off, why don't you turn them back on?" All of them came back on. Boom. And then she's
Whoa.
like, "Oh, really? Aren't you something?" And she said her name was Shelly. And so I'm like, "Shelly, stop." And she's like, "No, let's ask them a question. Like, is somebody here? Can you light them up differently?" And they did. It was like boom, 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 like different lights. And then
Wow.
she's like, "Uh-huh." And she's like, "Well, you don't scare me." And then poof, they'd all go out. And even the law enforcement people were like, "Come on, that's enough. Let's go. That's enough of this." And
Wow.
so she's like, "Okay, I'm sorry. I was only playing. Can you please turn all the lights back on?" Boop, they came on. And I was
That's
like,
wild.
Wait, this is too much for tonight. Let me get my bag." Everybody was like, "Yeah, we're all leaving. This is enough of this." I'm like, "I'm not going to stay here till the wee hours doing anything with as much activity as going on here. It's just not fun." So we all left and got out of there. They stayed on, and they had always told me, if just leave the lights on in that top hall because it is so dark. There's no windows up there. So I never touched it, and I did not ever want it to be off. So when we left, though, as you lock up downstairs, it's, glass door so you can see everything. And once we all got out and I got everything locked up, those lights went out again. Boom.
Oh,
And I was like, "Well, nobody's
man.
coming till daylight, so that's okay." And I less and less did I stay up there at night
I
because it was
bet.
weirder and weirder. It was really a lot
Did
of activity.
did you go
And
in the
Mark
chair?
picked up on somebody. I didn't, but got Shelley did, and several other people sat in it, and they really did feel sick. Like they
Yeah.
immediately felt kind of ill, and they felt like somebody, one of them thought, she's like, "I can't prove it, but I'm telling you, it felt like somebody shook the chair, like, get out of my chair." And
That's mad.
so I never did. They're like, "Are you going to sit in?" I was like, "No, because this is my office. I'm just trying to make it pretty and write some books.
Yeah.
No, I'm not." And they're like, "What's with the scratches?" And I was like, "Can we just leave
Yeah.
bad things alone? Just leave it alone." But Mark, he loved that office. And he picked up on one of the actresses that he said used to perform there. And he said he picked up the name Gabriella, but he did pick up on little children and the fire. And here's my good thing. if I do see somebody that's passed or I'm doing mediumship for somebody, I see them in my mind's eye, not so much standing in the room because
Mhm.
I keep it very much. I'm the most reluctant person to read anybody. I just am like, stay back because at my whole life, I've just wanted it to just be out of the way.
Mhm.
And Mark is like, come on, full force, immersion, he's just all in. He's one of those people that would get on the worst roller coaster and just arms up and let's go. And I'm like, no, I'm not even getting on the roller coaster. So, but he just immerses himself in it. So he picks up on all these things and that I'm like, no, I don't want to know. I just no. But he picked up on that, and it was really interesting. It's a beautiful space,
Yeah.
and all those historic buildings, I love them. But you've got to kind of know, and you being in the UK, you definitely know that you just sharing space. We're really just
Mhm.
sharing space. This is
Yeah.
not ours really. We might own it, the title at the moment, but how many people did before you?
Yeah.
And if it's
Yeah.
a public space or a public building, all the energy in that, I liked Mark's idea about it. He's like, it imprints on a place because they got high anxiety, whether it's, gosh, I did really well
Mhm.
here, or did you hear me sing tonight, or the play was beautiful, or the opera was great, or whatever. And it was the only opera house in this area. You would have to make the trek, which was long, over an hour, now over an hour by car. So back then on horse and wagon kind of a thing, it would have been, I mean, hours and hours to go to Dallas to see a play or something. It would have been a
Yeah.
big thing. You would have made a weekend at least of it. You'd have to
Mhm.
travel there, see the play, and then come back. So it was a bigger deal to do that. So for this whole area around here, the opera house was, the biggest entertainment. The
Yeah.
funny thing too, I don't know, there were outlaws, like Sam Bass was an outlaw around here in Texas. And in Haunted Denton, I talk about it too. I put it in there that he used right across the street from the opera house was used to be an old stables and livery, and he was a stable hand before he was an outlaw. And he got in with some people, as they say, some wicked people, and he had this mare he would call, I think, the Denton mare, and she was so fast, and he would race and he'd win with her all the time, but he fell in with some shady characters, and then he started robbing things, and he was actually, people really loved Sam Bass, but he was an outlaw, I mean, no doubt about it. So it's just interesting. There's just so much history and so many stories. Bonnie and Clyde had been down there. I mean, just
Oh
all kinds
wow.
of things. Yeah. And even back, there was a lot of hangings down there because of the courthouse.
Mhm.
And you had back, way back, you had Indian raids still going on and all the stuff, and they would set things on fire and attack people, and then people would attack. It was just a
How did how
lot.
did Sam Bass's fate? How did that end
He
for him?
actually he ended up dying, trying to think, but he even, they still search for his gold, Sam Bass's gold. Because he was in, I wrote a book for about Haunted Hill House in Mineral Wells, and it's called Haunted Hill House, Darkness. Darkness is in Texas, and they have what is called the East Mountain behind that old, very haunted house, and Sam Bass would frequent there. And it's said that it's possible that either in one of the wells on their property or in one of the caves in the East Mountain, he hid his money. And there used to be an old railway that went right past the house. I didn't know that, and I didn't see the tracks, when I was out there. But I told him, I said, I keep picking up on kids going, saying, "Oh, look, there comes the train," and stuff. And I keep seeing this, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you can't tell, but yeah, there used to be train tracks right there, and the train ran through." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, okay, okay." And they're like, "That's how Sam Bass was traveling back and forth." And I was like, "Okay." And of course, on horseback too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so really curious. You can never tell.
Yeah, man. I love that. I love that. I love cowboys. I love the cowboy
Oh yeah.
shows and
Well,
stuff like that.
you should come to Texas.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. That'd be amazing. I think I might have
I'll
been a
take you to
cowboy in a
all the
past
best
life.
haunted places.
I love cowboy stuff, man. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Well, did you watch the series Dallas? Probably.
I didn't see. I know,
You know it?
I
Yeah.
know it.
I
Yeah.
You
And
would
actually,
love it. There
where I
was
live in, because I'm from Essex in the UK,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
there was a house. I think I told you this in a message. There
Oh
was
yeah, and I never knew that.
the Dallas house. Someone obviously loved the show. They got the
Yeah.
blue. They got the blueprints for the actual Dallas house, and it's literally built. It's right near where my nan lives. I think it's still there. There's like a Dallas house in the
Another
forest
Dallas
in Essex.
property.
It just
Yeah,
looks
another
like, yeah,
Dallas ranch.
it's awesome.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful place. But yeah, in Dallas. And later that series went on, for years. And every time I would travel to the UK and people would be like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Oh, Dallas." And they're like, "Oh, no. Oh my gosh." And
Who
because they
shot
love the
JR?
show.
Who shot
Yeah, who
JR?
shot JR? And and I said, well, for a little bit of fun trivia for you, after, the series was so popular, they did a movie called Dallas the Early Years about kind of like a prequel about the first people. And I was a extra in that. And they did it in a really,
Oh
really old
wow,
part of town and stuff. And they had all the saloons and everything. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was fun.
that
It was
is
fun. So
cool.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow, it's
Yeah.
using
So I'll have to
Dallas
see
as
your
well.
Dallas house. You'll have to see it.
Yeah, I'll find a picture. I'll send a
I was
picture.
born and raised in Dallas, but
Mhm.
I've been in Denton for about 30 years.
Wow, that's
I have to
cool.
see your Dallas house, though. That sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
I will.
Somebody loves
Next
it.
time I pass it, I'll get a picture and send it over. I
Yeah.
think it's still there because we always just say, "Oh, there's the Dallas house. Beautiful house, like on its own. Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely. Wow."
Pretty.
So going back to what you said about the theatre as well. I mean, you hear that about a lot of theatres seem to be haunted because of that
Yeah.
energy that's in there. You got
Yeah.
the
And
shows
if
of
you think
people.
about it, like if you and I were like, oh, we're going to sing tonight, and all these people, you'd have 100 people out. Who knows how many people? And
Yeah.
it was a big deal. I mean, it's still a big deal to perform somewhere, but back then it was huge. I mean, people spent so much time and effort just how would they dress to go,
Hmm.
much less the people performing, and you didn't want to make a mistake. You wanted everything to be the best. And if it was the best, maybe that was your shot at the really big time. Maybe you'd go to San Francisco, or who knows where you'd go.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd go to London. Who can say? But
Yeah.
there was a lot of pressure, like now. But I think that intense energy of whether it did good or bad, but just the performance sits into those old stones and bricks and everything. And part of the brick that built that, on that foundation was from some of the burned bricks that they
Wow.
didn't want to waste from the courthouse when
Yeah.
those burnt down. So
It's
that
got
could have
that
something
energy
to
in it.
do with it.
Yeah.
And thinking about that when you brought up like theaters having so much energy, I saw a show the other day and they were talking about comedy places where comedy shops and stores, as they call them, whatever, where
Hmm.
they perform are I never knew that they were so haunted. And people are like, "Oh, are you
Yes.
kidding? Comedy?" Yeah. And they're like, there's
Hmm.
so much energy, and a lot of times a lot of the comics are really dark and up depressed. They're
Yeah.
not they don't have funny personal lives sometimes. And
Yeah. No,
so
for
a lot of
sure. I used to
energy,
do
a lot of
stand up.
energy.
I used to
Did
do
you?
stand up comedy. Yeah. And you meet a lot of obviously strange characters, great characters,
Did
but
you
some.
ever feel a haunting when you performed?
I think theatres and places like that have all got an energy that you can feel. Like
Yeah.
whatever the theatre, like wherever there's performance, I do think you can feel that energy as well. Like
Yeah.
like like an old house when you go into an old manor house and you can just
Oh
feel
yeah.
that history. I feel like
Love
that's
those.
the same in a theatre, but probably even more amplified when
Hmm.
you go to a theatre because you've got all that energy that's there, all that, and there's something to that, as you were
And the
saying,
nerves,
the
whether it's
nerves.
good or bad.
You've
Yeah.
got people that are happy there. When you've got a lot of big group of people that are having a good time, that energy, you got
It's a lot
all
of
different
energy. And
personalities.
spirits feed on that energy.
Yeah,
So that's another thing too. So it
yeah,
kind of the living become the dead and they
Mhm.
all become,
Yeah.
it's a little symbiotic relationship everybody's got going.
Yeah. So when you was a kid and you were
Yeah.
seeing stuff, you were seeing faces and hands, and you
Yeah.
this
I
was
don't know
obviously
about the
something.
hands. If somebody's got an idea about hands, we need to know
Yeah.
what's the deal with disembodied
What
hands
is
and
seeing
why can't
hands?
a spirit little girl, if it is a little girl, whatever it is,
Hmm.
not leave an area?
Yeah. Is she a
That's
little
all.
girl? That is the
Yeah.
question.
Maybe somebody knows.
I've got. So when did it sort of stop for you? Because you said you don't see things as much now. You still get the
I
feelings and
think
the
just
knowing.
because as we grow up and we shut it down, and I've learned how to shut it down and keep it away from me, you can tell it's always around. And especially when I'm focused on my writing and different things, you can just feel it crowd in around you, and I'll have to stop and I'll be like, push that energy back and tell them to
Hmm.
go away.
Yeah.
Where I never did embrace it, like where Mark just is like, oh, it's a party, all right, I'm
Yeah.
like, no, no, no,
So
no,
do
no,
you
no,
think
table for
if you
one.
wanted to, you could open yourself even more
I
and be seeing
definitely could.
entities
And
every
Mark has
day?
always been like, let's do that. And I'm like, let's don't. Let's don't.
Well,
I'm not
you're like
going to.
me because I love this stuff. Like obviously, I do a paranormal podcast. I love it. I
Yeah.
love talking to people. I've had a lot of experiences myself that are crazy, wild
Yeah.
experiences, but I still get very scared of it as well.
I
Like,
just think, I think because it just I mean I believe it, I'm a skeptical believer, which people don't like. They're like, why can't you just give in? And I'm like, I just am wired to be more scientific. Like I don't always think when you hear something that it's Aunt Tilly. I would say, did somebody break in? Go do that first. Go check. Did somebody break in? Do you have a raccoon? A squirrel, maybe? Are you over or under medicated? Any of that? No. Maybe it's Aunt Tilly. But I just don't go there first,
hmm
And to me, I don't think anybody should really want to just think everything, every bump in the night is something, because rule out what you can, debunk what you can, figure out what you can, and it leaves this very terrifying 1% that you can't explain that should keep everybody up at night.
hmm Yeah.
I mean, really, because it's real, and I
Yeah.
believe it's real. I just want to discern what is it first,
hmm Yeah.
you know. But yeah, it's never gone away. And I can, like, if people, will ask me, like, can you help me? Or I really need to do this, get to somebody, or I'm worried. But I never want them to tell me who,
hmm
and I'll just see. Sometimes I'll bring something through. And I never wanted to do that. Mark was so excited when I started doing that. And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah, you just grow. And I was like, no, no, it's always going to be at an arm's length. I can see them in my mind's eye. They don't need to show up.
Yeah.
This is all good. And sometimes they do show up, but it's very rare because I really don't want them to. And I'll just shut it down.
And
Because
how
at
would they
first
present?
I didn't do it. I didn't know how even.
Hmm.
And I think I was just too open and too foolish, right? To think that it's just everybody's on their best behavior. And then my other property got so haunted, we're just ridiculous haunted. And so I had to cleanse that out. But you kind of keep a protective bubble around you, and you have to, it's just like anything else, it's work to train yourself to keep energies back, connect with them if you want to, but protect yourself. I am not interested in any kind of, something where I want them to be on me, in me, around me, using my energy, nothing. I'm like, nope.
Have you had anything
Mark
like
is
that?
like, here is your gravy train. And I'm like, Mark, but he does. It's really interesting though, because I've been with him. He's like, I'm going to just go into a trance. I'm going to let them all take over. And I was like, no, don't do that. And he's like, well, but I am. He's like, so what I need you to do, because I'm going to be doing automatic writing, is I need you to just keep turning the pages so that I don't do too much on one page and lose a message, because sometimes it's words, sometimes it's this and that. And I was like, okay. So I have no problem with somebody else doing it. Just I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so we went to an event in Gainesville, Texas. And this is a real historic place. And it had one of the biggest, I think it is still the largest mass hanging situations that happen. And one of my great uncles was hung, because my father's side of the family, my great 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 on back, he was a freedom fighter. He did, even in Texas, there were slaves. People don't really think about it much, but there were. Not as many, of course, as in the deep South, but they did have them. And so on my dad's side, they were freedom fighters, and they would try to help slaves and fight for their rights and stuff. Well, that was just, it's not popular. And they didn't get my grandfather, but they did my great, few back. But they did get my uncle. And so he was one that was hung out there because they wanted to teach them all a lesson. And so Mark was we went to the park after we had an event of things and lectures and stuff during the day for people. We went to where it happened. And gosh, it was a bad scene, I mean, they hung people, and some of it was to teach them a lesson, but some of it was also a land grab because they had lands they wanted, they had money they wanted, and that's gone on forever. And so, anyway, whatever the purpose, that's what it was for. That's he was hung, and some of them. Now he did. My family did go and get his body, and they tried to stop him, and they fought him back, and they were like, we'll kill you, but we're taking this body, we have no problem killing you guys. And so
Wow.
they got him out and gave him a burial, but a lot of people didn't get to come out, and their bodies were, just laid out in the creek that was there. Animals got to them. I mean, not everybody had a proper burial immediately. I think some, later they did, but sometimes it wasn't everything. It just was bad. It was just it was a bad scene. So anyway, you can look it up, like the Great Gainesville, Texas hanging, and you'll find that. So anyway, Mark was just picking up all these messages, and he was in a full trance. And he had told me before, let people come up and ask me questions because I can answer them and I'll be tapped in. And you just keep turning these pages and then let me talk. And don't be scared because sometimes I talk in other voices and sometimes my face changes a little bit. And I was like, okay. And people were amazed at the messages and everything that were coming through. They were fascinated, but there was some of them that would get so scared. He would tell them something. They're like, it's absolutely true. Oh my gosh. They would run off screaming, down the park, right? Then they'd come back and like, can you tell me more? And I was like, oh my gosh. And he was in trance for
Wow.
a long time. And I kept thinking he should really come out, but he was in trance. I think he was in trance for sure for over an hour. And I'm not sure how long you should be, but
Yeah.
I went on a long time. And then he just kind of finally slowly came out of it and he was fine.
Did your uncle come through?
He did. He came through and he was like, thank you. His message was, thank you for the respect. Like, thank you, for respecting him and also kind of shedding some light on the fact that of course, it was wrongful hangings. Any hanging is really wrongful. But it was, in his case, he was not like going on, he was a freedom fighter in his heart, but he wasn't like going with them all the time. He was just a farmer raising his family and doing things, but he was the closest one they could get. So they went on his farm and took him, and took him and hung him.
Whoa.
His wife was a little bitty but spunky thing, and there's stories of her riding it, having somebody watch the children. She rode into town with his gun, and force the sheriff to let her see her husband. He's like, nobody sees anybody, and she pulled the gun out, and she's like, I'm seeing him. And so he's like,
Wow.
all right, go on, And so she was the only one that got to talk to him before he was hung. And it's a really sad story, but things like that happen. But Mark, yeah, he tapped right into all of it. So
Wow.
it's very interesting what he can do, but I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. I have no intention, no
Texas
desire.
is Texas has got a wild history, isn't it?
Oh,
Amazing
it's so
history.
wild. Oh my gosh.
But
It's still kind of
wow.
wild. We're
Yeah,
still kind
yeah,
of wild compared to the rest of the
yeah.
states. We're still on our own.
No one
It's a
messes with
Texas state
Texas.
of mind. Don't mess with Texas. And they're pretty much packing all the time,
Yeah.
people. Yeah, everybody's carrying. But yeah, it's a different state, but there is so much history. I mean, you go way back. I mean, you go back to so many, the Texas Revolution, even, and the Alamo, and then you go forward and just the Indian Wars, all these different things. It just is a
Hmm.
lot happened here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which adds to that energy that
yeah,
we, yeah.
yeah,
So interesting. What do you
yeah.
think? What do you think? This is a difficult question. But what do you think ghosts are? What do you think the paranormal is? And I know that's
Like ghost, well, I think it's that we are energy. I think we're all made up of energy. I mean, we are. That's just a science thing.
Mhm.
We're mostly water, but we also have the stuff of the stars in us. If the makeup of the stars is inside us too. So it's pretty fascinating to think of us. And I mean, if you really think, we are souls that are in a body, and it's sort of animated souls. This is what we work through while we're here on this plane. But the soul doesn't die just when the body gives out. So it goes on and just goes into another dimension. I think sometimes they don't want to leave. They like where they are. They're very on the earth plane. I think sometimes they immediately are just like the biblical saying of, absent in the body, right there with the Lord. And so I think that happens probably mostly. But I think there's different dimensions. I think you get to visit. I think you get to do a lot of things. But I wrote in one of my books because people ask that question. They're like, they just don't. I think it was Shade of Angels and maybe something else. But um, reading the unwritten, I think I put it in there too. But I kind of use the analogy like with, steam. So, like a big, huge steam engine train, right? Those are big, powerful things. Well, without the right temperature, you don't have steam. At 212, water becomes steam, it becomes power. It's a vapor. So it sort of changes form. And in some ways, you could say it's a mist that disappears, just like some people say, I saw a ghost. It was a mist and it just disappeared. But it's powerful enough that, steam at 212 degrees to power a train. So my thing that I tell people is think of like let's take ice cubes. Yeah. So they're frozen. In that state, the water is frozen. So, like, we're in this solid form, which isn't solid. Really, it's a bunch of cells. If you were looking at it in a different way, we're all particles.
Mhm.
But for the most part, you and I, we look solid. Let's just say we're solid. We're an ice cube. And then when, we lose that form, then let's say it melts. Yeah. And so you're not solid anymore. You've gone into another state like a liquid. And then as you move through that to the next, level, that kind of comes as a mist. But if you captured it, and that kind of explains reincarnation too. It never goes away, it just changes form. But if you had something like even your hand catching that, this as the vapor goes up, it would turn into droplets of water. And if it changed temperature, it would turn back into a solid cube again, i.e., maybe a new, the same spirit, but in a different body.
Mhm.
And so I think that is my explanation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good explanation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff. I've loved talking to you tonight. It's been
Oh,
super
it's been so
interesting.
fun. I've
Thank
loved
you
it.
so
Loved it.
much.
You got to come bring the family to Texas.
I'm coming
We'll
100%.
have a terrifying time.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I'm gonna wear my
Yeah,
cowboy
it'll be
hat
fun.
and yeah,
Yes.
and
We'll all get our cowboy hat and boots on
yeah.
and take you out. I tell you, there is a lot of history. If you go to the Fort Worth stockyards,
Hmm.
they do the cattle drive still certain times a year, the
Yeah.
rodeos. You can see all those old saloons and things. It's a
Hmm.
lot of history, a lot of
Yeah.
history. You'd love it.
I love it, man. I think I was
Yeah.
possibly a cowboy in a past life because
You
it's
might have been. You
I
might have
feel
been.
like I
That last
recognize
ice
it.
cube
Yeah.
was at a saloon with a
Yeah.
cowboy hat. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Sure. I think you can go to Teal Gray Books. You can find me on Amazon. If you look up any of my books, like if you looked up Teal Gray Haunted Denton, It's going to show you haunted Weatherford. If you go to Teal Gray on Amazon and look up Haunted Hill House, Darkness Resides in Texas, then you would see the book we talked about, and it links to all my other things. You can follow me there. If you want to jump on Facebook, I'm Teal, Teal period Gray, Gray. And you can also do the same thing with Teal Gray Books on Facebook and follow me on there too.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I will share the links in the show description so people can
Great,
find
thank
you
you.
easily. Thank
Okay,
you so much. You're welcome back
thank you for
anytime.
having me. Oh, I
Let's talk
love it. I
more.
love it.
Let's
Thank
talk
you so
more.
much. I'm
And
going to
yeah,
hold
just
you to it.
keep up the great work and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Guys, thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, share it where you can. That is a great way to support us. And we'll be back very soon for more freaky conversations. In the meantime, stay safe and keep it freaky. Bye for now. Thank you.
Good night.